system. There's an interaction of buyers and sellers that determine prices. You have buyers that are willing to pay a certain amount for goods. You have sellers that are willing to sell a certain amount of goods for those prices. Each price reflects the goods' values to the buyers and the cost of producing the good. Prices guide self-interested households. Now again, these are rational folks, so they're self-interested. They're interested in taking care of themselves, um, in maximizing their own, what you're going to learn to be called utility. And firms that make decisions that in many cases maximize society's economic well-being. How do they maximize society's economic well-being? Well, first, they're efficient. They produce as many goods as possible. When many of a single good is available, that good becomes more widely available not only to local markets but broad markets as well. And when there's more of a good available, it's less expensive, which helps the consumers. So that benefits society's economic well-being. Principle 7, governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. There's an important role for government, is to enforce property rights, be it the police or the courts. If someone runs into your car, you have a property right claim. You also have insurance, hopefully. But you have a claim that can be taken care of by the police and or the courts to protect your property. Same thing with your land, your house, and so on and so forth. People are less inclined to work, produce, invest, and purchase if there's large risk of the property being stolen. Many third world countries have a lot of problems developing their own market economies because there's no viable property rights. They could produce something, but a lot of times it can be just taken from them. So property rights are pretty important. Basically sets the playing field. So the government can be a great referee in terms of property rights. They can also help out in cases of market failure. When the market fails to allocate society's resources efficiently, this could be for any number of reasons. Causes of market failure can include externalities, which is when a production or consumption of a good affects bystanders. Think of pollution. A manufacturer causes a great deal of pollution that affects society. And other causes of market failure could be market power. Single buyer or seller has substantial influence on the market price. An example here would be a monopoly. Public policy may promote efficiency. I can tell you from experience, many times it may not. But the idea is to seek a government that tries to promote efficiency, reduce externalities, reduce issues with monopolies. Government may also alter a market outcome to promote equity. If a market's distribution of economic well-being is not desirable, a tax or bevy of welfare policies can be used to change how the economic pie is divided up. Again, that can affect efficiency. However, if you have something like a progressive tax, income tax in place, those that are more able to pay taxes pay a larger share, which is then used, that revenue can then be used to create welfare programs for those at the bottom of the ladder. Again, the idea of a welfare program, at least the original intent of a welfare program, was to provide a safety net for individuals in society to fall into. Unfortunately, in the more modern area, we've had some issues with people jumping into that safety net, but we can address that down the line. So now we look at how the principles of how the economy as a whole works. These are primarily macroeconomic principles, but important nonetheless. So if you're here for micro, you're going to get a little macro education here. Principle 8, a country's standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. There's huge variation in living standards across countries over time. The average income in rich countries is much more than 10 times the average income in poor countries. The U.S. standard of living today is about 8 times larger than it was 100 years ago. So even the U.S. poor, our poorest of the poor, would be considered quite wealthy in third world countries. A country's, again, a standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. Principle 8, the most important determinant of living standards is productivity, the amounts of goods and services produced per unit of labor. How productive is the country? Productivity depends on equipment, skills, and technology available to the workers. Now, in the U.S., we're very blessed with equipment, skills, and technology, so our workers can produce more units, more production per unit of labor. So the average American worker, if that's the unit of labor you want to use, is far more productive than a lot of other places. Other factors, for example, labor unions and competition from abroad, have far less impact on living standards here. Now we move on to Principle 9. The prices rise when the government prints too much money. Now, sometimes I mention this and people look at me kind of crazy, but yes, the government does print money, and they print money every day. It's called quantitative easing. Not necessarily every day, but here of late we like to print more money. And when something becomes more widely available, no matter what it is, it's more common. And when things are more common, it's less expensive. Okay, it's easier to obtain. This is called inflation. Inflation increases the general level of prices. Now, prices respond to the value of the dollar. And when there's more dollars available, the dollar has less buying power. It's less valuable. So when the dollar is less valuable, prices must rise. In the long run, inflation is almost always caused by excessive growth in the quantity of money. So the government prints too much money, which causes the value of money to fall. The faster the government creates money, the greater the inflation rate. Principle 10. Society faces a short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Now, this is a lot of the things that you'll see on the nightly news. Inflation and unemployment, but you may or may not know that there's a short-run trade-off between the two. In the short run, generally classified as 1 to 2 years, many economic policies push inflation and unemployment in opposite directions. Now, depending on the policy, if inflation goes up, unemployment goes down. Unemployment goes up, inflation goes down. Other factors can make this trade-off more or less favorable, but the trade-off is always present. I don't want to get into the intricacies. We'll have a whole chapter on this between inflation and employment right now. However, I want you to know that they're negatively correlated. If one goes up, the other goes down. Just remember that. So, in summary, the principles of decision making are: people face trade-offs. The cost of any action is measured in terms of foregone opportunities. Rational people make decisions by comparing marginal costs and marginal benefits. That's thinking at the margin. What is my cost for this decision? What is the benefit for this decision? That's marginal costs and marginal benefits. And people respond to incentives. The principles of interactions among people are: trade can be mutually beneficial. They have something I need, I have something they need. We could trade. Markets are usually a good way of coordinating trade. It brings buyers and sellers together. Government can potentially improve market outcomes if there is a market failure or if the market outcome is inequitable. So they can address market failures and improve efficiency, and also address areas where there are serious issues of equity. Lastly, the principles of the economy as a whole are: productivity is the ultimate source of living standards. The more productive a nation is, the higher its living standards in general. Money growth is the ultimate source of inflation. And society faces a short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. This concludes the chapter 1, the 10 principles of economics. And you will find that you keep coming back to these 10 principles. That's why we start here. So I thank you for listening to this lecture. And if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. Thank you.